Good morning. Good to see you all here this morning. There's people still filling their coffee cups and racing in the back door here, so glad you found your way in. Hopefully you grabbed one of these on the way in. Today is January 2nd, 2022. 2022 has kind of rolls off your tongue. It's a little easier than 2021, 2022. Lots of twos. So today's January 2nd, the beginning of this year, and you know, I was just thinking about resolutions. They're almost a joke. You know, people joke about, well, do you make resolutions? Ha ha. Because nobody keeps them. But you know, it's not a bad idea. I don't think it's a bad idea to take us to pause at a time like, you know, when the calendar changes to a new year. It's not a bad idea to hit pause and think about what do I want to do this year? What do I want to be this year? And I think that's I would suggest if you do make resolutions, and I think they're okay, just don't make a couple of them. Don't make a whole list, because then we'll laugh at you, because nobody can keep a whole list of resolutions. But a couple, probably a good idea. Anyway, hopefully you grabbed a bulletin on the way in. Just a few announcements. If you're new here, if you're visiting first, second time and haven't filled one out, there's a green card in the seat back in front of you. If you could fill that out. And there's a green box back by the middle doors. If you could drop that card in there on the way out, that would be grand. Would appreciate that. That box is also available for contributions from regular attenders. If you have a child in here or children that need a place to move around a little bit, make a little more noise than what is helpful in here, there's a wiggle room down the children's hallway, and feel free to use that. Just a reminder from Abby in the nursery, always been looking for nursery volunteers. If you want to help out watching little ones, check that out at contact Abby at nursery@seacreek.org. Well, that's handy. And the Fusion Conference, the regional conference with churches that we're affiliated with in the Wisconsin Dells, is this week, the 6th through the 8th. And it is not too late, apparently, to sign up. So if you are free to do that and want to take that in this week, 6th to the 8th. And if you do, just want to remind you that the church is ready and able to pick up half the tab for your registration and lodging. And last but not least, something we do each year is called the State of the Church address. You know, we have a State of the Union address this time of year coming up pretty soon, but we like to pause again and kind of just provide an update of where different ministries of the church are at. And so January 30th, you can look forward to the State of the Church. So with that, I'll call Rob up to begin.
Yes. Well, glad to see everybody here. You made it through the cold. And it's amazing how the weather, we just notice it, and so we talk about it. I mean, one of the first things I've had 10 short conversations this morning, and probably 9 of them included the weather. How cold it is. And it is cold out there. But you know, I say this a lot, but one of the things that I think is fun about this time of year, and even the place that we live, he's shaking his head at me. No, it's true. Listen, when it gets cold like this, we see things that we don't see when it's warm. And when we see the world around us, it really truly is a picture, or it helps us to understand God. I put bird feeders out. I do it all year long. And I love to have bird feeders out. But when it's cold like this, I'm amazed at the wonder of these little birds, these tiny little birds that you know, they weigh an ounce or something like that. And it's 15 below, and they are just as active, and they're singing in the trees, and they come and they eat it, and they can survive in this terribly just harsh environment. And we think, my goodness, I don't even want to walk from my house to my car, and I want an automatic start to my car so I can start it in the garage so I never have to go outside. And I get it, it's cold. These birds live in it all year long, and they survive and they thrive because their maker, their creator, designed them to do that. And every one of those little birds, God says, I see him, I made him. I know him. That little bird, yep, I remember that one. It's amazing to me just to look at him. And then just the beauty. I see the cardinals with the red right next to the blue jay with the black and the striking blue against the snow. And I have these little, I forget what they all are, but these little tiny yellow ones come and they sit next to the little tiny red ones, and they all eat. And they all eat different things, and it's just amazing to me. So, yes, it's cold, but you look outside. God is not, this is not a desolate, empty wasteland. This is God's handiwork. This is God's design. And you and I see it. And if we lived in Mississippi, we'd miss all of this. They see other things. They see alligators, which is totally God's design too. So, it's good for us to just look around even in times like this. Well, as Mark said, it is 2022, and we are going to begin a new series. And Mark mentioned about resolutions, and one of the things that about the new year, I think it's, as Mark said, I think it's kind of fitting, or we just seem to want to have this idea of starting over, don't we? And there's something about the turning of the year. It's like a clean break almost. It feels like, and there's something about that we like, we enjoy. It's I don't know if it feels good or if it's just a nice time to kind of reassess and. Sometimes we talk about a new year, or we could wish perhaps that the new year was a complete starting over. There's a complete and total reset. I don't think that's what the new year is, because we bring last year into now, and I was thinking about it, this is the 59th new year that I've seen. The first one, I was only 11 months old. I don't remember it much, but my little eyes saw it. This is the 59th new year I've seen. But every one of those 59 years kind of comes with me into 2022. So a new year isn't this is a completely starting over and everything in the past is gone. That's not how it works. But I do think that it's good for us, helpful for us, can be very beneficial for us to have a time when we kind of reassess and maybe look forward and say, all right, here's where I am. I can't make all that go away, but I can look at, okay, here's where I am, and where do I want to go from here? We can do that. We can always do that, and we don't have to do it at the new year. But I think at the new year, we kind of think along those lines, and I think that that's okay. So we are going to do a series starting today. And it's going to go for the next couple weeks, and it's what we call 2022 Best Practices, building a solid base for your spiritual life. And so what this series is just that. I guess it's pretty self-explanatory. We're going to look at things that you and I can do that can help us, that can create a foundation for us to have a strong, healthy, growing spiritual life. All right? So now I have to, probably at this point, it's good to give a little explanation. In your bulletins, it says we're going to talk about the word in prayer. That's not true. It was true a week ago. And then I started working on this message, and I realized, nope, for different reasons, I'm going to change it. And so what I decided we were going to do is we're going to talk today about the Sabbath. And then this morning I decided that's not true either. We're going to spend today just introducing this thing. The joke Greg, we have a little production meeting every Sunday morning, just kind of talk through the service, see what's going to happen. And Greg, my good buddy Greg, who knows me well, said, "Did you make your normal New Year's resolution to have shorter teachings this year?" I said, "Yeah, I do that every year. That's always my New Year's. Never done it once, but that's my resolution." Well, I looked at this message this morning and realized this is going to be a 65-minute message if I don't change something. So I changed it. So today what we're going to do is just kind of talk about why this is important, okay? And then as we go on today, I'll tell you what these best practices are, and we'll hit one of these best practices every week for the next 4 weeks after this. So, why is this a thing? Why would we want to talk about best practices for building a spiritual life? Well, I want to kind of think about this a little bit. So I want to show you a video here, and Luke's got this video. The Winter Olympics are coming up. And this gal that you're going to see is a Winter Olympian, and here's what you're going to see. You're going to start with some of her exercises that she does, and then the second half of the video is actually her performing. She's a mogul skier. Luke, you got it ready to go?
Hi, I'm Alex Moore here with OnTheSnow.com from the US ski team. We're here with Heather McPhee, World Cup winning mogul skier, and we're going to take you through a preseason workout. So Heather's doing the overhead med ball toss here. She starts with her hands underneath the med ball. She has a 6-pound ball here. She throws it between her legs and then up explosively in the air as hard as she can. Focus is on a big jump, pushing her feet through the floor, and a very explosive movement. So Heather here has the barbell on her back, comfortably placed, hands a little bit wider than shoulder width apart. She's going to squat down and then explosively she's going to jump up as high as she can. When she lands, she's going to focus on a really soft landing. First point of contact is the balls of her feet. And then she's going to absorb that impact and then jump up as high as she can. She's going to keep her head up and chest up throughout the lift. And the focus here is on making sure you jump as high as you can every jump. So the next exercise for the preseason workout is lateral box jumps. Heather's going to focus on jumping up to the box, landing on the far side, and then coming back across. She's going to be as fast as she can on the ground, and she's going to get as many repetitions as she can within 20 seconds.
Our next athlete, Miss Heather McPhee from the United States of America. She's up top. She wants you to make a little noise. It's time to get it on.
Bib 6, McPhee, competitor ready. 3, 2, 1.
McPhee, on course. McPhee with the gigantic backflip, penciled out and looking good across the line. 29.27. That is the fastest time we have seen yet.
She won that event. When you look at what she did there for her workouts, there isn't an Olympic event for jumping up and down with a barbell on your back. That's not an Olympic event. There isn't an Olympic event to see how many times you can jump up on the little stool back and forth. And yet she did those things, and she did them. They were very basic things, and she did them a lot. She did them every day for many, many, many days. Kind of these basic, repetitive things that she did so that they would put her in a situation where she could do what she really wanted to do, which was ski down the hill on those moguls, hit those jumps with her legs strong enough. Does that make sense? She wanted to be an Olympic mogul skier, And she wanted to be really good at it. To be an Olympic skier, this is not just, okay, I made it down the hill. This is, I need to do it well. I need to do it quickly. I need to do it artistically. There's a lot that goes into that. For her to be an Olympic mogul skier, she did these things that really weren't skiing at all. But they created in her a foundation so that she could do that. Your spiritual life is the same way. Your spiritual life is the same way. If you want to be a strong, mature, spiritual person, there are some basic, repetitive things that you and I need to do to create a foundation, to create a base, so that from that base we can do spiritual, powerful spiritual things. Does that make sense? Just like a skier. In fact, Paul, the guy who wrote much of the New Testament, would say things like that a lot. He would say, you know what? Your spiritual life is like a runner. And so you have to run, and you have to keep going. You have to train yourself. I don't have this verse, but there's a verse where Paul says, train yourself to be godly. I wish I had thought about that verse before now. Anyone know where that verse is? Some of you folks with phones can look that up. Train yourself to be godly. I do have quite a few verses here because I think this is important for us to recognize. You know, we have grown up, many of you, well, many of us haven't, but this new generation has grown up in the world of Marvel superheroes. Now, actually, Marvel superheroes go back long before this, this generation. But Peter Parker, right? That's his name? Spider-Man? How did Peter Parker get his superpowers? Spider. He got bit by a spider. I can do that. Have you seen the commercial, the Liberty Mutual commercial, where the guy wanted to get bit? Watch it. That's not how it works. We don't get powerful by getting bit by a spider or something like that. We get powerful by doing some basic, repetitive things over and over and over again. That's true physically. It is true spiritually. Take a look at this verse here in 2 Peter 1, verse 8. Actually, the verse is right before this. He says this in verse 5. For this very reason, he's talking about the fact that if you have accepted Christ, if you have become a believer, you have now the ability to become strong spiritually. In fact, in verse 3 it says, God's divine power has given us everything we need for life and godliness. And so that through these things he's given us his very great and precious promises, so that through them we may partake in the divine nature and escape the corruption caused in the world. So Peter is saying to you and I here in 2 Peter 1, 3 through 4, he's saying you have the opportunity to be strong. You can be an amazing person. You have everything you need for life and godliness. And so you can partake in this world in the divine nature. You can be a mature, strong, growing spiritual person. Then in the next verses he says, because of this, for this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith these certain things. So he says, look, you have the ability to be strong. Because you have the ability, it doesn't mean that you are. Now walk into that. Add to your faith, add to your salvation these things. And he says, look, grow in these things. Make every effort to add to your faith goodness, knowledge, self-control, perseverance, godliness. Then he says this in verse 8, for if you possess these qualities in increasing measure, they will keep you from being ineffective and unproductive in your knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. In other words, what he's saying here is, as a Christian, you have the opportunity to be a remarkable person. You have the opportunity to be a powerful spiritual force in this world. I believe that, and that's what he's saying here. You have that opportunity, but it doesn't just happen automatically. You have to add certain things to your faith. You need to grow in them if you possess them in increasing measure. Now that implies that I don't just get them all at once. I'm adding these things and slowly I'm increasing. Slowly I'm getting better. Slowly I'm getting stronger. Slowly I'm adding things to my life, to my spiritual life. And if I have them, well, I'll partake in the divine nature. I won't be ineffective and unproductive. Here's another verse. I have this one up here in the ESV version. I like it here. It's Hebrews 5:14. Says this, but solid food is for the mature. He's talking about spiritually. He's comparing our spiritual life to our physical life. And he's saying when you're a little baby, you eat milk. But then as you grow, you eat solid food. Spiritually, it's the same way. We start off small and weak, but we grow in strength and stature. Solid food is for the mature spiritually, for those who have their powers of discernment trained by constant practice to distinguish good from evil. He's talking about spiritual things. You can discern, you can distinguish good from evil. How many times have we just wondered, man, I don't know what to think about that. One of the things that a spiritually mature person can do is they can discern good from evil. That's good, that's not. And it's not always as clear as we'd like it to be. It's not always super clear what's good and what's not because this world gets confusing to us. But as a Christian, we can see into circumstances and we can know, but how does that happen? Well, my power of discernment is trained by constant practice. In other words, it starts small and I work at it and it grows. That's what that's saying. Spiritually, I start small and weak like a baby, but if I work at it, constantly practice, add to it, I become mature and strong. Does that make sense? It's something that we can grow in. Here's another verse, 1 Timothy. Paul, the guy we were talking about earlier, Timothy was his young protege, young man who was stepping into and taking over in many ways for Paul, following Paul around. And Paul says things like this to Timothy a lot. This is 1 Timothy 4:15. Be diligent in these matters, give yourself wholly to them so that everyone may see your progress. Again, Paul's telling Timothy, hey, Timothy, you've got some, you know the Lord, you want to know the Lord, you're growing in the Lord, but here's what you need to do. Be diligent, implying work at this stuff. Give yourself wholly to them, and then what happens? People see that you're progressing. You're getting stronger. You're getting more powerful. You are growing in your spiritual life. Didn't just happen all at once. Timothy just didn't start off as this great, powerful spiritual man. He grew into it as he gave himself wholly to it, as he was diligent in doing certain things. Ephesians 5. This is an interesting verse. I'm not going to read all of this, but starting in verse 8 of Ephesians 5, it says, Paul speaking to us as Christians, as men and women who have recognized that we need a Savior. We just talked at Christmas about a Savior. Jesus came. He was born with a body. He lived his life. He sacrificed his life to pay the penalty for my sins and your sins. If we accept that payment, we become Christians. That's what a Christian is. That's what getting saved means, is that our sins have been paid for by Christ himself. Once you accept that payment, God says, now you're adopted into my family. Now you're born anew. Now there's something different. The old is gone. The new has become. Now you're the kind of person that we're talking about here, where we are a spiritual person. Our spiritual life has been born, but we need to grow in it. That's who Paul is talking to here in Ephesians. And he says this, for you were once in darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. That we were separated from God by our own sins, but if you've accepted Christ, now we've stepped into the light. We've come home. Our spiritual life has been reborn. We were raised to life with Christ, and so now I'm a spiritual person living here in this world. But he says what you do here in this world, in this new state that you have, in this new spiritual rebirth that you have experienced, what you do is important. Live as children of light. Find out what pleases the Lord. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness. And so he's telling us, hey, what you do is important, and here's why. In verse 15, be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. This is an admonition to you and I that I think follows on the heels of all the ones that we have just said. Look, be very careful how you live. How you live as a Christian in this world makes a difference. It makes a difference. And we can be wise or unwise But here's why it makes a difference. The days are evil. The world we live in is not conducive to turning us into strong, powerful, spiritual people. It's not. The world we live in is conducive to keeping us separated from God. And so you and I have to make a concerted effort. We have to make a choice. Is this important enough to me to do what I need to do in order to grow strong? I would love to win an Olympic medal for mogul skiing. I would love that. I guarantee I ain't gonna. You put me up on the top of that hill, it would not look like what she looked like. Because I haven't done what's necessary to become that. Just haven't. Do you want to be a strong spiritual person? Well, you can be. You can be. Because by accepting Christ, like it said in 2 Peter 1, we have God's Spirit, we have God's promises. It is in front of us to grow and to be strong spiritually if we work at it. If we're willing to do the things that are necessary, if we're willing to do those basic repetitive things that will help us to grow. Does that make sense? But that raises a question. And this is why I decided we couldn't race past this today. Because the question I'm going to ask, I think, is the most, it's the biggest and the most important question in this whole series. It's the first question that you have to wrestle with if this series is going to mean anything. And depending on your answer to this question, this series will either be helpful to you or it will be not helpful at all. And here's the question. Do you want a strong spiritual life? The 2022 Best Practices. This whole series, it's called the 2022 Best Practices, Building a Solid Base for Your Spiritual Life. If you do not want a strong spiritual life, none of this is going to make any difference. Who cares? Who cares what the best practices are for having a strong spiritual life if I don't want it? And that's a question that you have to answer for yourself. I can't answer that for you. I cannot cajole you into wanting it. You need to make a decision. Is this really what I want? Because if the answer is yes, I really want this, well, then you're going to be motivated and willing to do the things necessary to make it happen. If the answer is, I don't know, you might do those things for a short time and then you'll stop. If the answer is no, I really don't want it at all, you're not going to do anything like this. It's like Mark was talking about with New Year's resolutions. I'm willing to bet that many of us in this room, if we were going to make a New Year's resolution, one of them might be, I'd like to lose a little weight. I would. That is absolutely something I would like to do. I would like to lose a little weight. But I also know myself well enough to know that it's not important enough for me to really do anything about it. Because if I want to lose a little weight, I have to change the way I eat. If I want to lose a little weight, I have to change the way I exercise. I have to do some things if that's going to happen. And if it's not that important to me, I'm just not going to do those things. And you know what? That's okay. If you decide you want to lose a little weight, or if you don't lose a little weight, that's not a life or death issue, but it is completely up to you. And I want you to understand something, that this question, do you want a strong spiritual life? That is up to you. You have to decide that. But I would offer this. Some questions are more important than others. Do you want to lose a little weight? I could probably easily stand to lose 10 pounds. Probably really easily. But if I do or don't, there's benefits to it. But maybe the benefits don't outweigh the cost. But other questions are much more impactful. I grew up with one of my cousins who is, I think, 6 years older than me. So he would have been 60 and wouldn't have been 65 yet, maybe 65 now. He was faced with a question 10 years ago when the doctor said, if you don't stop drinking, you're going to die. And my cousin, and he thought about it, and he communicated very clearly, I don't care. Living isn't important enough to me to stop drinking. So he didn't stop drinking. He was dead within a year. How important is this question to you? Is this, I could lose a couple pounds and that'd be nice. I could kind of grow spiritually and that'd be nice. Or is it, no. This is a life-defining question. See, you have to decide that as well. You have to decide how important is this question. I want to offer you my understanding of this, of that question. Let me put it this way. I'm going to tell you how I answer this question, and I'm going to tell you the priority it has for me, and I'm going to tell you why. And I'm going to tell this to you, not to say you have to make the same decisions, but to give you perhaps just a picture of what it looks like as you answer those questions. Is this a yes or a no? And how important is it? For me, do I want a strong spiritual life? The answer is absolutely yes. For me, how important is this? This, for me, takes perhaps the highest priority that I can give it. Maybe I'll say it this way. I don't know if there's something I want more. I don't know, I can't think of off the top of my head something that I want more than to grow spiritually. Let me explain to you why. And I believe let me explain to you why, and then you can wrestle with these things. Part of it has to do with who I am, who you are, who we are as people. I believe that there's different facets to us. We're physical. We certainly understand that. We eat and we the cold bothers us because we're physical people, and we go out there and the cold impacts us physically. So we're physical. We're emotional people. We have feelings. We're intellectual people. We think. I believe all of those things fall under the fact that I am a spiritual being. I was created by God, by a spiritual God. I was created and I am like Him, it says. I am like Him. And my spiritual side, the spiritual part of me, I think defines me more than anything else. At the very least, the spiritual side of me is going to outlast everything else. Let me read you this verse in Colossians 3. I'm sorry, I think I have this in NLT. Can you put it up, Luke? In Colossians 3, 2 and 3. It says, think about the things of heaven, not the things of earth. For you died to this life, and your real life is hidden with Christ in God. There is something that I believe, and this verse catches it, that who I really am is not this physical body. My real life is not the span of years that I will live here on this earth. I believe that I am made in God's image. I am like God. I am spiritual. I have a spiritual component that will live forever with God. Because I accepted Christ and my sins were paid for, I now have reserved for me eternity in heaven with God, and my spiritual life will outlast my physical life by infinity. By infinity. This is my 59th New Year. If I'm really lucky, I might get 30 more. I've told God I want to live to 120. So if I get that, I got 61 more coming. I'm not holding my breath for that. My New Year's, my physical New Year's, are limited. But I want to say unequivocally, I believe God when he says this. I died to this life. Why? Well, because I have eternity in heaven. So what I can accomplish here on this earth pales in comparison to what I'm going to do in heaven. Does that make sense? My spiritual life will outlast my physical life by a factor of infinity. I will live eternally in a spiritual state with God. I will live, if I'm lucky, another 30 years in a physical state on this earth. Which is more important? Which would you give the priority to? I'm choosing to recognize that who I really am is a spiritual man, and so I'm going to give myself to that. And it's a little bit like recognizing what we're really designed to be. I believe that I was designed to be in tune with God. I believe that I was designed to be in communication, in direct communion, that's a word, in direct contact with God, living my life side by side with God. I believe that's how I was designed to be, and that's a spiritual thing. Certainly it happens in this physical world, and God created the physical world, so that's part of it, but it starts with my relationship with a spiritual God. So my spiritual well-being, my spiritual power is what is going to make this life make any sense. It's what I'm really designed to be. Too often, folks, we give ourselves to something that we're not meant to be. Too often we give ourselves, well, I just have to be really good at my job, and that's my number one goal. No, it isn't. No, it isn't, because your job is temporary. Yes, you need to do it, but it has to be motivated and driven and encompassed by something bigger. Why am I good at my job? Well, it's because God made me a certain way, and he wants me to have an influence there, and he's going to direct and lead me, and I'm put here on this earth to be his. My job has to flow from my spiritual relationship with God for it to have any meaning at all, but too often we say, no, it's the job, and I'm going to really focus on that, and God, that's important, but he's going to be over here. We get it all backwards. You are spiritual first. It's kind of thinking about, what are you really designed to be good at? You were designed to be great spiritually. Most of us are not designed to be great physically, meaning we're not going to be a mogul skier. When I was in high school, actually junior high, in junior high, you could wrestle and play basketball. And then when you got to high school, you had to choose one. So I wrestled and I played basketball. When I got to high school, I had to choose. And I chose basketball. And I chose exceedingly poorly. I was not a good basketball player. Years later, my coach, the guy that coached the high school wrestling team, and I don't know if he knows this or not. Certainly, he does not have the to be able to see into the future. But he told me years later, Gerber, if you would have gone out for wrestling, you would have been a state champion. You were just good, and it's true. When I was wrestling in junior high, I never lost. I always won when I wrestled. I chose basketball. I sat at the end of the bench for 4 years. My senior year, I finally made varsity because you couldn't be on JV as a senior. Me and my two buddies, one one game, we knew we weren't going to get in, so we didn't put our uniforms on. We just put our warm-ups over our jock straps. Because there was no chance I'm getting in this game, and I knew it, and everybody knew it, and so it doesn't matter if I'm out here or not. I would have been, I think, a really good wrestler. I gave myself to something that I wasn't ever going to be good at. Understand something. You are designed to be great spiritually. That is who you are. Will you give yourself to it? Will you give yourself to it? I answer the question, do I want to be strong spiritually? Yes, because it's who I am. Here's another reason I answer that question, yes, an emphatic yes, with high priority. It's because it's how my life is going to be assessed. You know, as you get to my age in life, you become more and more cognizant of the fact that we look at our span of life here, and we want to know, what impact have I had? How am I going to be assessed? Did I live a good life? Did I not live a good life? God is going to conduct an exit interview with you, I believe. He seems to be very clear about that. Someday when you and I leave this earth, God's going to sit down with us, or in some venue, you are going to have a conversation with God, and the conversation is going to be about how you conducted yourself here in this earth. I recognize that, and we all have a desire to do well. If you want that exit interview to go well, I believe, I'll say it this way, I believe that my life will be judged on how I did spiritually. I'm going to read a verse to you here. This is in Matthew 25. And it's a parable that Jesus is talking about, where he's talking about this idea that someday we're going to leave this earth and we will be judged. His master replied, it's a story where Jesus said, hey, this master had given his servants different amounts of money and told them to invest those amounts of money. And so they did. Some invested them, some didn't. And so now this part of the story in Matthew 25, the master now is working through with each of the servants as to how they did with the money that the master gave them. And in this first one, I'll start in verse 19. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents, that's an amount of money, brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. I think we have to understand something, folks. As a Christian, God's love and affection for you has nothing to do with how you perform. God's love, His affection, His commitment to you has nothing to do with how you perform. You can perform badly. God's love and affection and commitment with you doesn't change. That's what unconditional love is. He loves you without condition. You can't make Him lose His affection for you. But right next to that, at the exact same time, God will say, how did you do? And I'm going to assess you, and I'm going to reward or discipline you for how you did. As parents, we understand that. We struggle with that sometimes as Christians. Well, God either has to love me or He's going to judge me, because they don't go together. Well, as parents, you did that all the time with your kids. I love you, but you disobeyed. There is a consequence. God does it perfectly. We as parents did it sporadically and sometimes, but God does it perfectly. But understand, Christian, you will stand before God, and He will say, you need to give an account to me for what you did. It says in Corinthians that then God will reward us or not reward us based on how we did. You will be assessed. What you're being assessed on is how you live your life now. I want to do well. I want to hear. I think a lot about this. I think a lot about that. that I'm going to stand before God and I will long to hear him say, well done. Well done, good and faithful servant. The reason that I answer that question yes, and I put such a high priority on it, that has a lot to do with it. Someday my Maker, I'll stand before him. And I want him to say, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a little. Well done. So it stirs me. So the question is, if you're going to be assessed with your life, how are you doing? Oh goodness, that just sounds legalistic, doesn't it? Well, tough. That's just the way that when you go to school, I had 7 years of college and grad school. I never once had a professor say, it doesn't matter, I'm just going to give everybody an A. I like all of you. Everyone's getting an A. And nobody expected it. What test are you studying for? Think about it that way. If this life is a college class, what test are you studying for? If you want to pass math, reading English literature isn't going to help you. Is it? You better study math. If you want to pass art class, going to the gym and shooting hoops probably ain't going to help you. You better study art. Let me tell you what I believe. If you want to hear God say, well done, good and faithful servant, at the end of your life, you had better be pouring yourself into the things that are important to him. The spiritual side of your life. Now there's a third thing. It's who I am. That's why I answer this so strongly, yes. It's how my life will be assessed. There's a third thing, and it's the end of that passage. Come and share your master's happiness. I believe that as I grow strong spiritually, it makes God's heart happy. And I want to do that. Whether I get anything for it or not, I long to make my Creator and my friend and my Father and the one who loves me more than anything. I want to make the one who died to save my soul. I want to make the one who created me and watches over me and cares for me. I want to make him happy, and I think it does. When I grow in my spiritual life and become strong, my master is happy, and I can share that. Here in Proverbs 23, verse 15 and 16, I think about this verse in relation to my relationship with God. He says, my son, if your heart is wise, then my heart will be glad. My inmost being will rejoice when your lips speak what is right. When I grow spiritually, it blesses God's heart. And I want to do that. Whether I get anything out of it or not. I just want... It's amazing. It is incredible to me that I can influence God. But if I understand these verses correctly, it does. God grows in happiness, or his happiness is... I don't understand it, but I believe it. If my heart is wise, if I'm growing spiritually, then God's heart is glad. It's an if-then statement there. Depending on me, God is glad. If his inmost being will rejoice when I am growing. I know the right thing to say. I'm discerning. I'm obeying. I'm following. I'm growing as a spiritual man. Does that make sense? That's incredible to me. And I don't claim to understand it, but I believe it. That my spiritual state can make God filled with joy or sadness. In Genesis 6, God looked down on men and he saw that their thoughts were only evil all the time, and his heart was broken. Somehow, God's love for us puts him in a situation where our choices influence him, his emotions. I don't know. I don't understand it. I don't know why, but I believe it because God said it. I want to make my Father, I want to honor him. I want to bless him. There's something, well, I just do. I want to bless him, and I think this is one way I can do it. There's one more reason I answer this question so strongly. Do I want a strong spiritual life? Absolutely, and it takes priority over so many other things. There's one other reason why, and it's a joy to those who are around me. In Proverbs 29:2, as I live my life, as I grow spiritually, I become a blessing to the people around me. Proverbs 29:2 says, when the righteous thrive, the people rejoice. The best thing you can do for the people around you is to grow in your relationship with God. I tell this to young couples all the time when we do pre-marriage counseling. We talk about, okay, what's a husband's role? Well, love your wife. What's a wife's role? Well, respect your husband. And then those are such great needs. But here, and Sue and I have said this to so many young couples, but that can't be your first focus. You cannot say, my number one goal is to love my wife or love my husband. No, your number one goal is to love God. You do that, and he's going to put you in a situation where you're able to love your wife, where you're able to respect your husband. If you try it on yourself, you're only going to get this far. If you decide, I'm going to seek you first, God, and I grow in that, then it puts me in a situation I can love my wife because God first loved me and I'm living in it. The degree that I am soaking up God's love, a relationship with God, is the degree that I can give it out to the people around me. You want to be a blessing to the people around you? You pour yourself in to your spiritual life, to your relationship with God. So you got to answer that question. And I pray that you would think about it. Do you want a strong spiritual life? If you answer it yes, then for the next 4 weeks, or some 3 weeks, or 5 or something, I totally screwed this series up by... We're going to talk about these things. Here are the 4 best practices that we're going to talk about in the weeks to come. The first one is a Sabbath. Rest and focus. So we're going to talk about what is a Sabbath. Well, it's something that God tells us that we can do, and the kind of the gist of it, what's underneath it, is this idea of rest and focus. We'll talk about what it is and why it's important. Then we're going to talk about a quiet time. You've heard that word a lot, and it's the word in prayer. Maybe a better way to say it is learning how to communicate with God. Learning how to talk to and listen to God. Third, we're going to talk about fellowship, building relationships amongst each other. Who we have relationships with and how those relationships function can help us or hurt us in our spiritual life. And finally, we're going to talk about evangelism, which is a word that just makes people scared. Makes me scared. But it really gets down to mission and service. These 4 things, 4 best practices that will help us to grow into spiritual life. Now, one last thing as I end this. See, boy, it's a good thing I didn't try to do 2 here. One last thing. And Mark mentioned this when he talked about New Year's resolutions. He said, don't make too many. Here's another thought along those lines. All of these things, as we talk about these things, and if you feel like God is saying, yeah, that's something you can really step into, here's my counsel to you. Do not think and do not try to be perfect at any of them. That's not the goal. Absolute perfection is not the goal. Here's your goal. Maybe I just need to start, and that's okay. Just starting is enough because it's a step in the right direction. You take one step. And so if you've never done these things before, you are not going to be perfect at it when you first start. You're not going to be perfect at it at the end of 2022. It's okay. Starting is enough. If these are things that you've been doing and you think, I just really need to grow in these, then you improve. You're still not shooting for perfection. Does that make sense? One of the things that's so hard is to think, well, if I don't do it perfectly, I shouldn't do it all. Get that out of your head. I'm going to start, and then most likely, sometime in 2022, I'm going to fail at whatever it is that I'm trying to do. That's okay. I'll just get up and I'll start again. And I'll take a step. I'll improve a little bit. A little bit of progress is a powerfully good thing, and that's okay, all right? Best practices to build a strong spiritual life. But here's what I want you to think about this week. If you take nothing out of this, ask God at some point in this week, God, do I really want to grow spiritually? Do I really want that? And let God answer, because He knows. Sometimes we have a hard time really discerning our own motivations. God knows. Ask Him, see what He says. Lord, I just pray for us, each one of us, that we would choose. I believe, God, it's amazing to me that we have the chance to be close to You, to grow in our spiritual life, to become powerful. You have given us the opportunity to become amazing people. I believe that. I just pray, Lord, that we would see what that looks like and we would choose to do it. I pray that we would become the powerful, mature, spiritual sons and daughters that You've given us the opportunity to be, Lord. And that's going to take our whole lives. But I just pray that if there's a step we can take, if there's something we can start, something we can do new, something we can do again, something we can do more diligently, something we can do better, whatever it is, You know what it is. We want to let You lead us in this. I pray that for myself and for all of us here. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. After that long message, we're going to take a break, 3 minutes. There's cookies out there. I'll meet you at the cookies and coffee. Be back here in 3 minutes.